Thank you for your patience. We have another match for you. Like I said, Snellian versus Noah Field coming up. Joining me on the desk this time is Zologrim. How's it going, man?
Hey Aqua, thank you. I'm doing great. I'm having a great time casting my second monthly cup, and I'm looking forward to lots of more interesting matches for sure.
What do you think of this matchup? You know, two team addicted members going at it. Snellian, has always had good ladder performances. Created the blue Dream deck. You remember that when Dream cost free Lake, and then we had this like really heavy control deck dominating the ladder. Do you remember that one?
I don't think I've actually played against that one, which is a good thing because it probably would have made me rage anyway, because I'm not the biggest fan of combo decks of any kind, I have to admit. So yeah, I'm not too heartbroken that I missed out on that one, I have to say.
But yeah, he was the original creator of that. And then we have Noah Field as well, running Midweek Madness, King of the Hill, an event organizer within the Faeria community, and also bring some spice. He told me he's bringing some spicy decks to the tournament. We had a best of 23 on Thursday, and he promised me he'd bring something interesting. So I'm looking forward to that.
Definitely. I think Noah Field, even being a bit of a controversial figure, which is great for casting events because it adds some spice, like you said. I think he's a guy who's not afraid to bring a bit more experimental decks, which always makes for a very interesting cast. So I'm really looking forward to this match and see what he is going to bust out this time against his teammate.
He tried an experimental deck against me in the best of 23, and it went really well. And even after the series, I was just like, this deck's legit. Like, this deck is actually really good. And he was like, oh, I might bring it. So I'm hoping he brings it. I'll see if he does. So we're going to throw it over to the caster, Scorch and Cappuccino, to take the match on. So take it away, guys.
All right, welcome in everybody. I'm very excited for this matchup here. As mentioned, of the kind of strange things that Noah Field brings, he actually mentioned to me earlier in the week the lineups as well. So I actually have seen what he's playing, and it's very interesting. So what do you think of this matchup, Cap?
Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm also really looking forward to see what Senilian's brought. I think every time I see Senilian on ladder, he's always experimenting with these different deck types, and I've seen him trying out all the different variations of Bargain, Blue-Red Bargain, Mono-Red Bargain. I've seen him playing the Dream deck, the Mono-Blue Dream deck, and he seems to be a very good experimenter. And I mean, Noah plays a lot of interesting decks too, but usually not to the same caliber as Senilian. So we get to see whether Senilian's decks can hold up against Noah.
Yeah, it'll be... It should be an awesome match either way, of course, because we get to see some interesting things come out. Noah Field starting with a green list here. Senelian bringing what looks to be a yellow, probably more of the event style. So how do you think this matchup favors either player?
Yeah, I mean, yellow events is extremely strong against green decks. The synergy between Charger getting up to being a massive attack creature to kill any of green's large creatures, or even just Shaitan Demon being a 3 Faeria 5/4 body. Now this is insanely strong up against Wood Ellies, up against any creatures you can expect to see out of the green deck early on. And then if Verduran Force is summoned, if these larger green creatures are played, yellow has access to that last nightmare, and it's very efficient at dealing with it. And Senilian with a very, very strong start, able to develop the Charger and the Demon early on if he wanted to. You're going to hold off on the Demon though.
Yeah, I think with no movement event in hand, you probably hold off on going for both just because your Charger ends up setting up to clear whatever comes down from the green player here, and the only spot for your Demon to come down is right in front of your orb. You really don't want that. You either want the Demon in an aggressive spot where it can hit your opponent's orb, or you want it set up in a spot where it at least can contest whatever your opponent plays, and right in front of your own orb is really bad for that self-burn. So but a really strong setup here by Noah Field, the double Wood Ellie really allowing him to play a lot of creatures down very early.
Exactly right. And Senilian picks up Flashman, so he has his movement trick now if he wants to get his Charger up to 4 power to help fight the board of Noah. But, he looks like he has a number of options here. Just Desert to the right, dropping the Demon, Soul Draining the 3/2 Wood Ellie behind the one you're killing. And that way, the Wood Ellie, when it goes to trade into the Charger, assuming there's no movement trick shenanigans, now we can see Noah has the Grove Crawler, But ideally, the 3-2 would then kill off the 2-1 Charger, and it would die off. So, Senilian trying to set it up as efficiently as possible, and potentially going to get punished here by Noah, especially if Noah is able to find a buff.
Yeah, Voice of Truth doesn't quite do it to the same extent that a buff would here. Sometimes that Voice of Truth you can find really nice spots, especially in something like this where Senilian went for the Soul Drain onto the 3-2. If that was a bigger creature, you can Voice of Truth it back up to full life and get even more value trades. So really not what you're looking for in this spot, though. You'd really like that to be a buff, and goes for the draw and does find the Runan's Guidance. Buff
picked up successfully. Even another line that looked interesting to me right away was just Voice of Truth to heal up your Wood Elemental to be a 3-4 again. Feed on the Voice after summoning it next to the Bone Collector to buff your Bone Collector, and then you could kill off that Charger and have it taunt up that Demon and set you up for trades. But, even better than that, we see the Runan's Guidance picked up, so looking like he's going to have some good trades.
Yeah, unfortunately, just based on the way it played out, Noafiel went for the draw there, which means he can't set up an extra land to get a good Grove Collar play here and really get the maximum value out of the Bone Collector. Looks like he is going to go for the Voice of Truth in the end, which, again, gets that value trade like we were just talking about, but doesn't set up any more power into the Bone Collector here other than going for the feed afterwards. But just if it was a position where instead of going for the draw, Noafiel had been able to establish another land, possibly could have used the Grove Collar to get the Bone Collector in beside the Charger dying as well. But here we see the Bone Collector just going to be in this position where it's going to get cleared by the Demon now.
Yeah, and this is really unfortunate for Senilian. He actually has the Last Nightmare to deal with the Wood Ellie, but then it's going to buff up that Bone Collector to be a 3-5. Actually, the Demon still trades into it. I'm a little bit surprised that Senilian instantly went for the draw rather than going for the land to make sure you could get that collection in. And it looks like he's going to go for the Flash Wind, get the collect, helps him develop the Fanatic. It would be really strong to set that Demon up near the orb of Noah, and just getting that Fanatic as a collector as well has a huge impact onto the board.
Actually chooses to move the Fanatic as well instead of moving the Demon up one space, which I'm very surprised by. That looked like a position where you could have put some more aggression onto your opponent's orb.
Yeah, he instantly emoted that was a mistake, so I'm assuming that he meant to target the Demon, but then accidentally double-clicked on the Fanatic and was forced to move it. And Noah now picking up another Sagami Warrior. He can drop 2 of these. Doesn't look that great, though. Decides to only go for 1.
I think having just seen 2 movement tricks, you're okay developing that creature onto the far side of the board as well. If your warrior is able to survive for a few turns over there, that could really help you get back into the game just with the extra Faeria that you need. You've also seen one Last Nightmare played from your opponent, and now with Kaleem coming down, maybe it's enough Faeria invested that this Verduran Force feels very safe to go for.
Now, Noah can use the Grove Collar, get the trade onto the Fanatic, and that Grove Collar is also going to block off the Demon to ideally get a pretty decent trade there. Now, do you favor the Wood Ellie or the Sagami Warrior? And it actually looks like he's going to favor the Warrior.
Yeah, I think this far side collection is just so important over the course of the game. Noah's going to be a little behind at this point, and with Kaleem down as well, you really need something to contest that. Otherwise, Kaleem's really just going to snowball a big Fairy advantage for Sunny over the course of the game. So getting that top corner established of a creature is really important for Noah right now so that he can keep dropping his other bigger creatures onto the right side to continue to contest whatever Senilian plays on that side.
Now, looking at the board, I'm trying to see if there was any way to get a Soul Drain Colossus play on, but just unfortunately, 1 Faeria short of that. You go for the Demon, and I mean, yeah. Demon's going to start contesting his board very nicely because Noah has to be getting out, Verduran Force or something like that in order to contest it, but then Senilian has the Wind Soldier, so very strong line, even against a Verduran Force.
Yeah, and that is what ends up coming down here. And this is actually really nice as well because the Demon and Wind Soldier will clear, and then you've saved your Colossus essentially. So especially if Noafiel had a buff as well onto the Verteran Force, just a really big swing in the power that you're able to trade off here and keep in hand for a follow-up.
Now, Soul Drain, an even better answer. Extremely solid. And that's going to allow him to dash that Colossus all the way up to the Orb of Noah. And this just looks like checkmate. Like, you get that Colossus up next to your opponent's going into, 3 Faeria, all they have is Sagami Warrior. You've got Kaleem, you've got Windstorm Colossus. What chance does Noah have in this situation?
It's very similar to what you guys were discussing in the Blue Jump last series that we saw, how they can play that slower game, they can play for trades, and then you're eventually going to outpace with Colossus. We see exactly the same thing here in game number 1, and Senelian able to take it just because there's no way for your opponent to keep up with that Colossus once you've played it down.
Yeah, now that we've seen, the yellow deck out of Senelian, though, I imagine now we're going to see Noah try and come back with a red deck to try and counter this. Typically speaking, when I've seen Noah play red, he likes to run a lot of Firestorm, so I imagine it's going to be a very heavy AoE variant of red control.
Yeah, I think the really nice thing, of course, that is what he goes for here. The nice thing is that sets you up into a good follow-up as well, because red is generally considered to be a little favored against something like Blue Jump as well because of the AoE. Again, you can very easily clear and get a lot of value out of your opponent playing Battletoads, playing Water Rallies. So this actually sets Noafiel up in a very good spot where if he wins this game, he then sets up into possibly a good matchup for the rest of the series as well.
Now, Noah actually develops the mountain next to his orb, so he's saying, okay, I'm going to sit next to my orb, make sure I am as efficient as possible with my lands, and just try and play this slowly. He's going to be finding Ground Shakers, he's going to be finding Flame Spitters, he can wait to find Bomb Slinger on the Chargers, and actually decides to push up a little bit more aggressive than I would have imagined, but with Cypher onto the board, it is a huge threat. Now we can see Senelian with a very great answer, though. He can preemptively Campfire, Soul Drain the Cypher, and then kill it off. And even with that Wind Soldier in hand, now he's also able to deal with that Underground Brigand from Noah.
Yeah, I really like going for the Cypher there so aggressively when you know your opponent can't have Last Nightmare because they went for the double Prairie start with the Outland Ranger instead of developing a Desert on turn 1. So the answer had to be in that spot, Soul Drain, which of course Senelian had, and then the Wind Soldier's a very nice pickup to follow up. Based on what Noafiel has in hand, I think you have to +1 Ground Shaker just to get a creature onto the board, but it looks so bad at this point. Ground Shaker really one of those cards that you want to get the maximum value out of its gift every single time you play it.
Yeah, and this is exactly why. You don't want Senelian to have that opportunity to develop a Charger safely. He now has to play it in front of his orb instead of set up to be double collecting, and he actually has the Flash Run, so maybe he can get some value, but Noah picks up the second copy of Cypher's Wrath, so definitely no hesitation. You double Cypher's Wrath that Charger. Do not want that to snowball the game.
Yeah, that is even losing the value off of the Cypher's Wrath of not getting the secondary part of damage to the orb. You're still fine in that spot. Just getting it to clear the creature. That Charger with even another Soul Drain can kill off your Ground Shaker there. Maybe a Flash Wind and any other event really allows it to trade up efficiently.
Now, it actually looks like this Charger is going to stick. Noah has the ability to retreat back onto that mountain and develop the Brigand in the well, or he can try and block the Charger from collecting, and it looks like he's going to go for that blocking line. Now, one of the weaknesses to this is if Senelian had a Last Nightmare, he could Last Nightmare it and trade into the Brigand, or if he doesn't have it, he can just retreat, and it looks like he's going to be forced to retreat as he does not have that Last Nightmare.
Yeah, that was a very interesting spot that Noafiel put himself in, essentially, where Last Nightmare just wins the game in that spot for the yellow events just because of the efficiency of clearing the Ground Shaker and then the Charger synergy to kill off the Brigand there. So very surprised that Noah here doesn't go for another aggressive mountain and get the Axe Grinder and maybe start to push some orb damage, just playing slow and continuing with that style here.
Now, I'm not aware of any punishment for developing the Axe Grinder, so I'm a little surprised he didn't go for it. It could be he's trying to threaten Garridan and preventing Senilian from developing multiple creatures, but I'm not sure how much impact there is with a threat like that. Um, Noah certainly is going to start pushing aggressive now, and I guess he just wanted to wait a turn, get it a bit more aggressive.
Yeah, one of the interesting things of this matchup and of both players playing very slowly right now is that if Senelian is able to get the right clears, Yellow Events is able to eventually get to a point where the red control player can't actually keep up with them once they start playing the Colossus, just because that 7/7 is really too big for you to handle. And Senelian now with a great clear, going to be able to get that last nightmare that we were talking about earlier, clearing the Axe Grinder, even going for the Wind Soldier to clear off the Brigand and setting up a Colossus, even in an aggressive spot or a little bit of a more defensive spot here. It's a very big swing for the Yellow Events player.
It looks like he's actually torn between killing the Brigand or killing the Axe Grinder, and I gotta say, I'm a bit more of a fan of killing the Brigand and then playing the Colossus to dash to your opponent and actually trying to threaten a race scenario, because you have the Wind Soldier to finish off that Axe Grinder. Your opponent's already played 2 Cypher's Wrath, so you don't predict him having a Cypher's Wrath to finish it off. Maybe a Flame Burst, but then he doesn't have that in the race scenario. So I think I'm more of a fan of killing the Brigand in this situation, and looks like he's thinking about it hard.
The other kind of side to it is the Wind Soldier looks so nice to kill off the Brigand here. And I think that's very difficult of how do you find efficiency out of your Wind Soldier later and later on in the game when you've already seen 2 Brigands played. Yes, you've already played 2 Wind Soldiers as well, if that's the line that you go for, but it just looks very strong here to go for the Wind Soldier as the follow-up clear, and then actually goes for double Demon instead of the Colossus.
Wow, and Noah with double Bomb Slinger is like the absolute nuts for dealing with these demons. You know, he could have alternatively just let the yellow player burn out, but you know, when you've got both Bomb Slingers to deal with these super efficiently, you just go for it.
Yeah, it looks really nice here, and one of the great things of Bomb Slingers is not only how much damage their gift can do of clearing off mid-range creatures or using 2 of them to kill off 1 big creature, but in this spot, anything that Senelian played on the left side right now is immediately going to get cleared by those Bomb Slingers just by having the 4 attack.
Yeah, exactly right. Unless Senilian is running Falcon Dives, these 4/1 bodies are going to be, you know, a huge threat for him to deal with. You know, you don't want to Wind Soldier them. Soul Drain is kind of efficient, but in this situation, Senilian's just so far behind on the board that he has to be setting up to collect. He has to be developing creatures, and he can't afford to be using Soul Drains and stuff. He needs to be saving it as event synergy.
In this spot, is Senelian... I'm surprised Senelian went for the draw instead of just double Prairie straight up the right there. I think this is a spot where he really needs to use the extra movement from Yellow to get at the orb as quick as possible. Could have developed up towards the right side well and then put Kaleem in behind it. Next turn, gone for the Kaleem's training. Even if he draws into a Flash Wind or a Fanatic, you're now pushing a lot of damage at your opponent's orb when you're only faced with 5, at least for this turn. I think that's a spot that Senelian could have gone for a race and possibly even won it.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, especially with the training and with having the event synergy you have in the yellow. Often Chargers can just actually deal 10 to face and then get out a Colossus, and when you do that, it's just so much pressure that usually the red deck can't race that. So I'm a bit surprised as well. Noah actually has Firestorm Flamespreader to deal very efficiently with the Charger. And, I mean, Kaleem's not very well dealt with, but he'll have Flame Burst for that later on.
I think you're in a comfortable enough position. Looking at 9 damage to the orb next turn where a Flame Burst ends up being lethal. Kaleem, if it sets up for double collection, it's almost too late at this point. You're looking at a position where Kaleem probably has to move back defensive, Outland Ranger, and give it the Campfire, or maybe even just use the training at this point to kill off the War Beast there, just to delay from your opponent possibly having lethal next turn.
I think I'm a fan more of using the training, so I'm not sure if Campfire is better in that situation, just because you want to have Campfire to keep your creatures alive, whereas I don't think the training is going to be impactful for that Charge 2 scenario.
And Senelian
Now-
just goes for the the surrender there, knowing in that spot he's probably never going to catch up.
Yeah, the only chance I can imagine he would have to get back into the value game would be finding like some Falcon dives to deal with those bomb slingers, but even then, that Kobold Warbeast was looking at 5 damage per turn in his face, so would have needed an immediate answer.
Yeah, the follow-up is so efficient from red control as well. Once you're in that spot, your Axe Grinders, your Kobold War Beasts are very efficient creatures coming down right next to your opponent's orb once Noah had been able to establish that mountain there. So we see a red-green coming out as the response here from Senelian. Generally something that is very good against red because you can get the extra buffs from Elderwood Embraces, that sort of thing from green, which really help you against the big creatures coming out from red.
Even on top of that, Grove Crawler's a 2/4 body, survives Firestorm, survives Flame Burst, and then Sagami Warriors. These are all sturdy creatures that are very resilient against red's removal. Now Noah has Flame Spitters, so he can help deal with those 3/4 bodies after doing an AoE, but it still requires that Flame Spitter.
Very interesting to see Noah. I think kept the Garrett in his opening hand, unless I missed the mulligan and then get it back again. Going for not only keeping that AoE if he's able to set some good clear up, but keeping it for the big presence of a Garridan 6/6 body, maybe even just for the flying to go far side and have that double collection.
Yeah, Noah actually gets the middle mountain tile in the well section, so that's going to be a very impactful bomb slinger spot throughout this match. And it's pretty huge that he was actually able to get it. It's almost more important, I think, than the Axe Grinder spot in these type of matchups where it's a mid-range style deck against a mid-range style deck.
Yeah, one of the other things with the land development as well, Noah was able to get that land because he was able to go double prairies. One of the big things in this style of matchup where you're a monocolor versus the dual color is you're able to extend your land so much faster than your opponent. Noah Fiel really only needs 3 mountains. Yes, you'd like better positionings for your bomb slingers always, but once he's at that 3 mountain spots, he can go for prairies to extend into good positions. He can go for draws or extra Faeria, depending on what he needs. Whereas Senelian is really limited by trying to get to 6 lands of 3 mountains, 3 forests for your eventual Crackthorns. So that's something that can be very big in a matchup like this.
Yeah, and I really like that decision by Noah. He had the ability to play the Garridan last turn to deal with the Axe Grinder, but he's looking at the board saying, hey, you've lost the right side. Most likely you're going to develop a creature on the left side. I'm just going to wait and get even more value on that Garridan. Now, it does make him slightly worse to AoE by playing a Garridan onto this board, but in this situation, you have to feel so far ahead just playing this Garridan.
Yeah, one of the nice things there as well, saving Garridan means that the Ground Shaker that Senelian just played didn't hit it. That's a very big swing in terms of what your opponent is able to then clear later on, because Ground Shaker hitting the 1 damage onto Garridan means it can clear it, whereas Garridan coming down second means that there will need to be something else coming out from Senelian in order to kill the Garridan with the Ground Shaker here. So really big swing in that terms as well.
And we actually see Verduran Force in Senelian's deck. So Voice of Truth and Verduran Force aren't usually cards you see in the green-red decks. And it looks like Senelian's teching them in, and it's going to be actually very strong against red specifically. Having the 6 Faeria 7/7 body can contest Ground Shakers very well, can contest a lot of the larger creatures from Noah.
Yeah, this actually seems kind of a more creature-heavy list from Senelian. A lot of times you see some of these smaller creatures, Sagami Warriors, Axe Grinders, and then you have all of these complement tools of the buffs, Elderwood Embrace, Ruden's Guidance, and then all of the damage from Cypher's Wrath and Flame Burst coming in from red. But here from Senelian, it looks probably a little more green-heavy. The Verduran Forces, the Voice of Truth, like you mentioned there, to have these bigger creatures from the start instead of smaller creatures, and then the extra complement tools on top.
Now, this actually looked very strong for Noah in, the past couple turns, but that Grove color line for Senelian really helped put him back into this game. And Verduran Force now to block that Brigand from double collecting. Verduran going to be a huge creature, and it looks like it's going to be putting Senelian back into the lead in this matchup.
I think debate here on whether he wanted to go for a Crackthorn, but you probably want to save that for a situation where you can guarantee you get the most value out of it. Senelian now getting to that 6 land break point that I was discussing earlier.
Yeah, I think on top of that, the Crackthorn Beast you don't really want your 2/4 Grove Caller to be getting the buffs from that. So it looks like he just wants to develop the Verdant and hopefully wait until the buffs are a bit more reliant as well.
Interesting. Okay, so Noafield actually went for the +1 Faeria there, and then just played Ground Shaker, trying to set up possibly a big AoE clear next turn. Going to get punished by the Voice of Truth here, but looked like a position where he could have just cleared the Verteran Force right away because the Brigand generates that extra Faeria when the combat triggers.
Yeah, really unfortunate. Now, Firestorm is sort of set up to hit 3 targets, and it'll finish off the Grove Caller. But it doesn't deal with the Verteran quite yet. It doesn't deal with the Voice of Truth, so not what he's going to be doing this turn. I think you just collect and bomb stun your Verteran. It looks like the strongest line.
Collection and the Brigand's attack, though, will generate the extra Faeria necessary to have gone Firestorm Cypher's Wrath to kill off the Verteran Force, but you don't generate any extra creatures onto the board, so very interested that Noafiel playing just very safe in this spot. Goes for essentially giving away his Cypher for free, which is a huge creature in terms of the way that this matchup can go.
Yeah, it looks like he's really fearing Crackthorn coming down, any type of Ground Shaker coming down to deal with his Bomb Slinger, and so I think he's just hoping to wait until Senilian's in a situation where he's only going into 3 Faeria. But with Senilian having that Voice of Truth set up to be collected in the bottom left, Noah doesn't really have an answer for that. So he's going to be scared of a 1 damage pain throughout this entire match, it seems.
Now we're going to see the Bomb Slinger Cypher's Wrath, very nice to kill off the Verteran Force here. Does establish you having a creature left onto the board versus the other line that I talked about that is just event-based. But you know, a big thing for Senelian here, as much as we talked about how good the Grove Caller play was to move the creature over for clearing Garridan, now the Grove Caller and the Voice of Truth both sitting in this bottom left corner. Both players have been fighting for positions on the right side, and Senelian's had that left side established, and we see an unbelievable Crackthorn clear, and Noafiel just forfeit the game.
Senelian with perfect RNG on that Crackthorn gets all 4 damage pains onto the enemy creatures, as well as getting 3 buffs onto the Crackthorn, setting up to be a 6/6, meaning it can contest Ground Shakers that come down from the red player. So very, very strong Crackthorn indeed, and Noah now with the chance to counter.
Now for what I think is the most interesting deck of Noafiel's lineup. Don't want to spoil too much ahead of time, but we will see a mono green coming out from Noafiel here. Or sorry, a mono blue coming out from Noafiel here.
Wow, Spring Mochi and Yak Attack. I wonder if this is going to be the typical Blue Dream deck that we saw from Senilian, or whether it's going to be a Dream Reaver list. Certainly going to be interesting. And Senilian with a very strong hand. Axe Grinder, Wood Ellie early. Definitely what you're looking for.
Yeah, blue lists like this, similar to what I talked about for the mono red last game, can extend lands very quickly and get at your opponent in good positions, or just set up onto the other side of the board. Senelian having to start on one side with the Axe Grinder here means Noafiel can choose to either set up on the same side and go for some aggressive plays versus going off to the far side. We know Senelian's going to have to develop so many lands onto the right just because that's where the deck wants to play, versus blue, which can really adapt as the game goes throughout its first few turns here.
Yeah, and I wonder if Senilian actually has some insight into the deck of Noah, as Senilian actually is going to be pushing very aggressively with his green-red deck. With double landing, it's going to set up the Forest Wood Ellie next turn, and even the Grove Caller line, sorry, he can't do the Grove Caller line, but next turn setting up the Grove Caller line, and very, very fast. If he has knowledge, there's no phantasms, he could still fear a Mythmaker, but maybe the Wood Ellie Sagami Warrior to dash block the collection even looks like a very strong line.
Yeah, this is really good. Just putting creatures onto the board, even just these small creatures. Blue doesn't really have efficient ways unless you have those transform effects, but you're looking at no AoE coming out from blue and very limited options this early into the game, so pushing this aggression as fast as possible coming out from Senilian.
And Noah with that library now, you know, definitely a reason to go aggressive if you're Senilian and you know the list. Library insanely strong card if it's left uncontested. And so Noah now going to try and protect it as best as possible and just keep getting that card and +2 Faeria every turn.
Yeah, this is going to be really big for Noah Fiel. Probably not next turn, but over the course of 2, 3, 4 turns into the future. Really needs a response on the next turn to keep up with what Senelian's doing. Even just dropping a Verduran Force on this next turn looks very strong, unless Noah Fiel can find a Frogify. So it's going to be really dependent on what this library can provide for Noah Fiel in terms of cards, because he's going to have the Faeria to play them.
Yeah, and this is actually a really difficult spot for Senelian, because when I look at this, I look at just clearing the board, but with the enemy having a library in play and still only 4 lakes, you need 7 for Dreamweaver, it almost looks tempting just to hit face, make the force in front of Noah's Orb, play Grove Color, and teleport your Axe Grinder to hit face, just for that additional damage. But it looks like he's going to play it a bit more reservative, just get out a Sagami Warrior, and I mean, that's going to be super efficient against the creatures of Noah currently. But there's the Phantasm.
That is a fantastic discount onto the Phantasm from the Spring Mochi. These 5/5s will be pretty big for Senelian to try to deal with at this stage, because he's played out these smaller creatures.
Yeah, the 3/3 still doesn't have a good trade line yet, but able to develop the Archon now, and Archon is going to be super good at dealing with these Wood Elementals, dealing with these Sagami Warriors. Senelian really going to be needing to find a buff.
Yeah, and one Mirror Phantasm already played means Noah Fiel is only one 7+ Faeria card away from that Archon turning into a 6/6, which is then really even more difficult for Senelian to deal with, because those buffs won't have the same effect here. And now we actually see Senelian picking up that Crackthorn Beast, gets a little punished for that Prairie play that he went for earlier, because he's 1 land off from playing Crackthorn this turn.
Yeah, again, he's put in that difficult situation as well of, do I clear the board? Do I pressure face? How much can I go face with? And, Noah running Healing Songs means if Senelian goes aggressive, those Healing Songs might just completely counteract that aggression.
There was actually a line there for Senelian to clear the library as well. Could have stepped the Warrior over and killed off the 5/2 Phantasm. Grove Caller, either your Axe Grinder or your Wood Elemental onto the forest directly in front of Noah Fiel's Orb, step onto the Mirror Phantasm spot and kill the library. I think you probably go for the Axe Grinder there because it contests the Archon, but the Wood Ellie can clear it as well. So I think the follow-up was very difficult, even though it looked very good to kill off the library on that turn.
Yeah, it would have been interesting, but at this point I almost wonder if it's part of your win condition, because Dreamweaver only takes you to 10, so if Senelian has Flame Burst in his deck, he can just wait, find some burn damage, and then just hope to burst Noah down in one go. And I think that's going to be his game plan looking into this as we go further into the matchup.
Beru now picked up for Noah Fiel is really strong here. If it's able to survive and get this production down, Senelian's going to be further and further from that Crackthorn being impactful, just because these lands are going to be cleared by Beru. So this could be a really big creature coming down.
Yeah, and on top of that, Archon now, as a 6/6 body, gets its buff before it's able to be dealt with. So going to be a huge creature now.
So best case scenario for the Crackthorn here is probably 2 damage to kill the Phantasm, the other 2 damage onto Beru, and then 1 buff onto your Verduran Force, or combination of 1 damage onto Beru, 1 buff onto your Verduran Force. Then you can clear both of the creatures on the right. You have your Crackthorn in behind to contest the Archon wherever it dashes to, but killing off that Beru right now seems really big.
I almost wonder if you can't, take that gamble though. Just going for the safe line of Axe Grinder, even just maybe I'm a little bit too nervous, but going for the Axe Grinder meant you could trade into that Phantasm, have a 7/2 Verduran that would still get in a lot of damage into the Beru and have the Axe Grinder finish it off. But forget my line. He goes for the Crackthorn and it doesn't exactly line up the way he would have hoped. Only 1 damage going into that Phantasm, unfortunately.
I guess another possibility was that it kills off the library as well, which would be pretty good for you. And there we do see the Dreamweaver coming out from Noah Fiel. So essentially at this point, just so far ahead in terms of Faeria and cards, and now board. Noah Fiel getting a little low on life, but we have that Healing Song, even the Dreamweaver if he chooses to go for that as well. So This is looking really strong for Noah to take the game.
Definitely, and Noah actually has a lot of options here. Looks like he's just going to use the Archon to trade up. Can +1 now, summon the Dream Reaver, put the enemy to 10, and just dash it to block. And honestly, doesn't even need to keep his Beirut safe because it's still an 8-10 body.
Yeah, unfortunate the way that it lines up there. Dream Reaver, generally you want to dash right to your opponent's orb and set up an enchantment play. But even just in this situation, it's very strong just in terms of board.
Yeah, this actually looks like a very strong line for Senilian, though. He's able to make the forest and actually get the Grove Crawler line to go face with that Axe Grinder. And putting Noah to 8 life after he's used the Healing Song, he's already used his Dream Reaver. There's a chance that Noah might actually just get burned out for not playing defensive and guarding his orb.
Another Dream River pickup's really big here to extend the value of the library. Now, one of the big things here of playing library, especially in a mono blue deck, is you don't have any way to kill it off yourself. So even as much value as it's gained, it does represent possibly killing Noafiel over the course of the game here. So it's something that you have to keep an eye on as you keep going here.
Now, Noah's on 6 life. He's taking 2 next turn from his own library. He has to heal this turn, I'm almost certain. You don't want to be vulnerable to, a couple Flame Bursts or Flame Burst Cypher's Wrath. But after playing that Reaver, it's going to be 2 Reavers down, a Healing Song down, so his healing is going to start to be really limited.
Does get that Dream Reaver now into a little bit of a more aggressive spot, and the Crackthorn for Senilian in the bottom corner really doesn't do anything here. If Noafiel is able to move Beru next turn onto the current spot where the Wood Ellie is, because that forest is going to be transformed into a lake, might be able to block off all of the possible follow-up Grove Caller spots, because that really looks like that's all Senilian's waiting for at this point.
Yeah, Noah actually picks up a 3rd Dream Reaver, so has all of the healing he's going to need. Still has to look for a way of getting the damage in, though, because you still always fear the ability of your opponent just to double Flame Burst face and have that be a lethal line. Now, I don't think we've actually seen Flame Burst from Senilian so far, so I almost wonder if he's decided to cut them in favor of adding in those Verduran Forces.
Yeah, this is actually tough for both players right now. Senilian, like you said, just waiting on that last bit of damage to end the game at this point, whereas Noafiel setting up for whatever he needs of his own for the extra damage to win. Dream Reaver currently not quite enough. Will have it with the Yak attack, so that looks like the positioning that he's moved into, but even just the Crackthorn moving back onto the mountain will stop that spot here.
Yeah, Wood Ellie's going to taunt up that Dream Reaver, and this looks so rough because that Water Ellie, is that just lethal? I think that's lethal.
I think that's lethal, yeah. 7.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can Yak attack and even have both Yaks hit into the Wood Ellie and have one go face with a Mythmaker buff. So lethal in the hand of Noah if he can spot it, but he made it into the monthly cup. This is going to be a breeze.
I think you can also just jump the Wood Ellie down, play 1 Yak to attack into the Wood Ellie as well, and then you go for your Dream Reaver and the Yak buffed by Aurora, like you said, to be the extra damage to the face here. Going for the Frogify just because he has the extra Faeria, but Noafiel does have the lethal here with all of the Yaks, so very nice just in terms of recovery essentially into the game from Noafiel once he's able to get the value of that library. It's just obviously showing off the strength of it.
Yeah, and going into any other future series we see, it's going to raise the question, is Dream Reaver the counter to the green-red Crackthorn list? We can see based off that game, Dream Reaver felt like a very strong deck. It could just be because Senilian set himself back by playing super aggressive, but I don't know, he kind of had to play aggressive to try and contest that library and just unfortunately didn't have enough pressure to do it early on.
Yeah, of course, just drawing all of the creatures, you're just throwing them onto the board, so getting into that aggressive line looked good for Senelian there. And we actually see Mochis and Gabrian Commanders in Senelian's blue opening hand here, so it's going to lead to more of a blue 7s, maybe a very similar list to what Noafiel's running.
Yeah, Gabrian Commander is a card that lately has sort of fallen out of the meta, but very, very strong cards with the ability to grow to a 5/3, so they can even contest Battletoads up against the mirror. And with having that charge 3, it is able to contest libraries very, very well.
And a Shifting Tide picked up. This will be really nice for Senelian to clear off if it is a library coming down from Noafiel, just guaranteeing that he can get those good positions.
Yeah, Noah recognizing just how much of a threat these commanders are, hits up the amazing emote. And, you know, Senelian with Shifting Tide, there's almost no way for Noah to develop that library in a safe spot. He sort of just has to play it beside his orb and just hope it doesn't get contested.
And that is exactly how he plays it down. Even just the fact that the commander here can trade into the Archon as well is such a big swing. Archon costing 4, Gabrian Commander costing 3. You've already gained 1 Faeria just in the trade itself. But the fact that the commander on the right has gathered from both wells, if that's the trade Senelian decides to go for, you end up with such a big swing in terms of Faeria gain.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I actually think I prefer the middle commander getting Shifting Tided up 1, and then charging all the way up to kill that structure. And that enables your right side commander to kill off that Archon, and then just Battletoads after. It looks to be a very, very strong line. Collecting with the commander on the left side, it sort of looks inefficient because you leave your enemy with both creatures to collect with.
And that, at least for part number 1, is what we see here. But I really think you have to clear the library as well before your opponent is able to get the value out of it here. Senelian follow-up has to be just Battletoads. I think you have a lake you can put down aggressive even if you wanted, and then the commander is in a position where it's going to kill off the Water Ellie as well.
Yeah, that's what I was curious of, is whether he goes for that aggressive lake, if it matters, or if he just needs to keep going for lands. And I almost wonder what a sign that aggressive lake would be, because I think from a value standpoint, that lake doesn't really accomplish much.
And that is the one that he goes for. Yeah, it doesn't... I mean, unless you are playing some more of the even Colossus in there as well, maybe you can get the value out of that. But you could have set up the same thing by going in between the wells, or just straight up the right side instead of the aggressive lake. And this actually gives a better clear as well. Noafiel can use the Water Ellie, jump across and kill that Toad for much more efficient than trading the Water Ellie into the commander.
Yeah, and with developing that Mochi, I mean, the commander doesn't have any good creature to trade into, unless it flips and grows. But to draw it, it would mean that he would have to forfeit the ability to double collect with that Toad, or even just using the Toad to kill off the Water Ellie.
Yeah, and of course the Water Ellie with the jump, even if the commander tries to retreat, would be able to kill it off, chase it wherever it goes, but very nicely picks up the Windfall there, gets the buff onto the commander, and then just throws everything down onto the board immediately.
Yeah, and this is blue first blue. Senelian managed to get his creatures to stick onto the board, dealt with that library, and now with being able to camp the spawn points from Noah just can't get back onto the board. This looks pretty game over.
Noah does have a essentially couple turn clear here. Can jump the Water Ellie over onto the commander, set up the Mochi up in the top left corner, and then you're setting up for that Mochi to be transformed by your Mirror Phantasm. Also sets up for 2 discounts onto the first 7-cost creature that you get here. So that could be a really big swing back into the game for Noah. But yeah, it just looks really strong here of Archon going to push up the right for double collection. The Mochi's already at the orb, especially with something like Aurora that was just picked up. Could push a lot of damage here and really put Noafiel on the clock.
Yeah, and he actually does go for the Mythmaker play just to speed up his aggression. And, you know, Noah picks up a Mythmaker of his own, but he's not within range of getting that trade. One of the downsides to Mochi's is it doesn't have that mobility that the Toads do. And Noah can get his 7th lake, can hope for Dreamweaver soon to have a sort of healing mechanic, but Senilian with the ability to burst 10 damage at once. Not even Dreamweaver can help prevent that.
One cost Mirror Phantasm looks very nice here, but again, it falls into the same situation of the Mochi, where it doesn't have enough range to really contest any of these creatures from Senelian right now. You're going to take another 6, possibly 10 damage on this next turn, depending on the way that the Archon moves for Senelian there. So yeah, just looking really like Noafiel's starting to find the pieces, but it's just too late.
Yeah, I almost wonder if Noah is forced into Mythmakering the Mochi and then Phantasming the Mythmaker afterwards, just to increase the amount of bodies he has on the board and just hope to get trades the way he wants them. Because by just doing a Phantasm on its own, we can just see that Senilian can just do the favorable trade for him.
Goes for just the Aurora by itself. Does set up probably something really nice next turn, because if the Archon does go aggressive, you can set up the right trade with the Phantasm there, but it's still going to be enough power sitting at the orb here for Senelian. Noafiel just needs really something extra, even just a Falcon Dive onto the Aurora there, but the Archon's not going to be in range. It's just setting up for what looks so good, even just a few turns from now for Senelian.
Yeah, and actually as it stands, Noah is going to have a pretty decent trade on his turn, able to Phantasm his Mythmaker to kill off the enemy Mythmaker, and then even now Frogify that Mochi and get the trade.
That's actually a spot where you can +1 and use the Healing Song as well. I think you want your opponent to commit just a little bit more, where you get down to like 2 or something and then use that Healing Song, where they've committed in inefficient ways just to try to end the game, and then you're able to end it through that Healing Song recovery. But now it's looking in a good position for Noafiel to have the creatures to recover. It's just, is it too late?
Yeah, and it doesn't look like there's lethal yet. I was trying to see if there was any way he could line up his creatures, but unfortunately with the Toad in the bottom not being able to reach face, that's what's setting him off. Now he's able to get he can have both Toads hit into the 5/4 Phantasm. He can run that Archon into the 6/4 and then just Phantasm his Toad in the bottom right after jumping up to kill off the top right Phantasm. And that's going to cause the board to be full cleared. But it might not be worth it. It might be worth just going for one face hit.
I believe we've seen nothing come out in terms of 7+ creatures here for Senelian to have gone for the Phantasm first and trigger the Archon so that it could have survived and use it to kill off the 5/4 instead. But yeah, this does look like such a good play here, just because you limit your opponent's options on the next turn. You're still looking like you're going to push 5 damage to the orb, and there's really nothing Noah can bring out here in terms of a good spot to defend and clear this Phantasm.
Yeah, not even the Archon looks like a good play, because coming down as a 4/4, it just won't be enough. So he's sort of forced in this position of dropping the Mochi and hoping now to draw into a Dreamweaver and have that be the discounted play for next turn.
I think a big thing with the Archon as well is you couldn't get it in a good enough protected position. The same with the Spring Mochi. If you put it in a spot where it's setting up to contest the Mirror Phantasm there, it definitely won't survive against Senelian's Mirror Phantasm. So just awkward lines there. Double Healing Song could come out from Noafiel, but it's just not going to be enough, because as much as you gain the life, your opponent's immediately going to clear it. So puts the library down. We'll see if Senelian actually lets the library kill Noafiel, or if he'll finish him off himself.
Yeah, it actually lets us see one more card from Senelian. So we get to see Orose. Now, I would have been super excited to see this match go on for a couple more turns, see if that gets to enter the board. It looks like he has Lore Thieves to buff up to be a 5-drop afterwards, so would be a little bit interesting to see how that ends up working. But yeah, Senelian going to beat Noah 3-2.
Yeah, very cool list coming out. We saw kind of the standard stuff from Senelian that we were expecting, more of the yellow events than that red-green, but that blue 7s looked very strong. Just the commander so early into the game to clear off. The library from Noafiel, just such a big swing in terms of the value that Noah wasn't able to get through the course of the game. So very well played there. Let's toss it back over the desk. Aquablad, what did you think of that match?
I'm only messing with you guys. You thought I was muted again, but I was just playing. That was a fantastic game, actually. Cool to see some interesting blue decks, you know, because we see blue jump so much at the moment. I know Noah and Senelian are both big fans of the ramp versions of blue. We were talking about earlier, Zolo, how Senelian, created this crazy dream combo deck. Noah, 11 blue 7s from back in early access. How do you feel those matches went? Do you think it was quite even?
I think we had the outcome of the match was pretty representative of the matchups and the player skill. I think both players played well, and I definitely think they both didn't disappoint, especially Love Noahfield bringing back Dream Reaver and Library, which is something that I've really enjoyed playing back when it seemed more viable. And it might actually be now that the meta seems... I think we're at a point in the meta game where it seems figured out, and at this point it's sometimes viable to go and look back at decks that were doing well in the past and might actually have gone under the radar. And I think Blue Sevens might just be a deck like that, because the matches we've seen were all fairly close, and especially we saw the great comeback mechanics that you have as a Blue Sevens deck, especially with the Dream Reaver. If he had drawn into the Dream Reaver in the last turn, he might have actually gone back into the game and be in a fairly good spot. So I think it's definitely a very interesting deck to see come out in this cup, and I'm really looking forward to see if other players might have other secret decks or decks like this in their setup.
One thing I did try out with Dream Reaver, especially after seeing the jump package being used in Twin Souls, I was like, well, maybe you can do that with Dream Reaver, bring the jump package out, try and control the board with the jumpers, and then go for that Dream Reaver, because the Water Elemental synergizes with a Triton Trainer anyway. I had reasonable results with it, but I agree with you. I feel now we all consider in the competitive scene that the game's been figured out, and this is the perfect opportunity to catch people by surprise, because they have expectations now in the tournament. I'm going to see yellow events, I'm going to see blue jump. And then you bust out something different, and they're like, whoa, what do I even do here? I don't know how to respond to this. So, Noah, well done to him, trying to bring some new stuff to the table. His green deck, unfortunately, didn't get to the same position it got when he played against me. It's kind of like a value deck, where you play Bone Collectors, you play Runin's Messenger, Bloom Sprite. You get all these cheap reduced creatures and all these value creatures, and you're trying to control the board that way. And it actually worked really well against me, but against a deck like yellow, it's pretty hard for green to stick to the board with nightmares and stuff like that. Is any of the decks that you liked from both players which really stood out to you, apart from the Dream Reaver one?
I think the Dream Reaver has to be my favorite, also because it's, just like I said, a bit of a dark horse in the current meta game. I also like the mid-rangey focus green deck, like you pointed out, that Naofi brought. But like you said, I think he was maybe just a bit unlucky with the opening matchup, because against yellow tempo, you have a really hard time playing mono green, just because they have all the movement to get the jump on you, and then they have the chargers to buff up and do value trades, and the nightmares for the big creature. So that's a really hard matchup to play, and I think it would have been interested to see how the mono green would have done against the Crackthorn deck, for example.
Yeah, I feel that both players played fantastically. I think Noah definitely showed some great positional play. Moving his creatures into safer spots, waiting for moments, especially in the game where he protected his library. We had Senelian, move up for the aggression with those Sagami Warriors, and had that Wood Elemental come down, and then Noah's like, you know what, I'm just going to jump to the left side, build a library, and I'm just going to wait. And that time he bought was excellent, because it allowed him to set up more creatures to fend off the green-red crap. But it was kind of pretty close, to be fair. Any double flame burst would have been dead, but luckily for Noah, he had all the cards he needed to keep him in the game and take the win there. So, fantastic series overall. We do have a bracket update, so let's see what's happened in round 2. We have just had Snelly and Noah conclude. That hasn't been added yet, but we can see what players did make it through to round 2. Now, Lou did beat Death Dozer in round 1. I know that was one of the hyped matches of round 1. Of course, we have Imperia going against Aether Llama beating Ranma. Movnik unfortunately fall into Satyrus, at the bottom of their bracket there, and Purlorn as well, another great monthly cup player, fall into the experience of Nightingale. Any other players that jump out to you there, Zolo?
I have to admit, I'm slightly disappointed that I did not get to cast a Mognik match so far in my 2 monthly cups because he kept dropping out early on. I mean, Mognik is one of the most experienced monthly cup players. I think he has the highest winning record in money in the cups, right?
I believe so, yes. I think it's him and Dan's that are like right at the top.
Yeah, and I'm just he always brings out very interesting, not necessarily the kind of decks that I enjoy because he's a bit of a combo player, but he always has a tendency to find very interesting, cool decks. And so I'm generally looking forward to what lineup he has for each cup. But him dropping to Saturas, I mean, Saturas is a very strong player in his own, so it's maybe not that surprising. And I'd be interesting to see what he's fielding, because I think he's a bit of a green player as well. He used to be in the past, so maybe he has an interesting twist on that.
Some of our kind of shout-outs here, we have Lyrico beating previous monthly cup champion Arianel. Loktar had a lot of hype built around him, but unfortunately he fell to newcomer Alva. I'm not too sure who that is, but making some noise already. Mayhem beating Hunter 3-0, even after Hunter's very solid ladder performance this season. Sweetie beating Killing Time, so Sweetie's making his comeback. I Win Again falls to Inara, sorry. I Win Again got 4th place in the last monthly cup. And Bananas beating Minokaro. Minokaro, a great ladder player as well. Teddy getting through round 1, and I'm excited to see Teddy play in the future. And then we had 2 more newcomers at the bottom, and it looks like Kodlaki was the winner there. So already a few upsets going on in this tournament, but that's kind of how monthly cups go in Faeria. We get a few upsets and we get a few new stars come through, but I'm excited to see what games we have coming up next. So we will get the next match ready for you guys. Stay tuned, don't go anywhere, and we'll be back with some more Faeria soon.